Okay, so for class 3 now we have that sorted. We have a TA for this class now. Tamara Chambers Richards is she's behind you. So she's going to be in class every class, helping mostly with the online students, their interactions when we're doing like the class discussion, working group kind of stuff. She's also going to be helping me with marking, so be nice to her. We're going to work together through the marking so that I will always have input on the marking, but we'll work together to make the marking a bit easier for me, and so you have some other input. Other things, office hours. So if you want to come visit me and you don't want to schedule a visit, just come by my office Tuesdays before class, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. I will be in my office, and you can just come and have a chat. If you have questions, whatever, just feel free to stop in. Honestly, I'd much prefer that to sending an email and having an email back and forth and scheduling a meeting. Just come by and say, hey, I have some questions about class or whatever. But obviously, if you need to schedule something, feel free to do that. Data Blitz for the online students. This part's important for you. If you're not in class, here's what you're going to do. You're going to record your presentation. You're going to send it via email or file transfer, and we'll play it during the class. So I want everyone to see your actual Data Blitz presentation that you've developed, that you've recorded. So we'll play the presentation during the class so that everyone sees the presentations. It's also, last year what we found out was that the class really was interested in seeing what the other people looked like and who they were and kind of what their story was. And lots of times they'd never seen the other person before ever. So it's a good way to actually see somebody who you're going to school with. Groups and topics. So the groups are updated in Blackboard. Just like the email I sent yesterday, check and make sure that they're correct. If you don't have a group name or topic, you need to get going on that. If you check the Blackboard and you've decided to change topic, let me know. One group sent me their name, which I hadn't updated, so that was updated. There's also a new student, Jennifer. Is she here yet? She's coming. So Jennifer is coming, and she got added to a group, and she knows that. So, and the group will know that today, I guess. And that's it for our housekeeping. Oh, this is a really bad setup. Okay, fix that next time. Okay, so today we're talking about public health ethics. Question, yeah? If you're there that day, you present live. Okay, so what we did last year is that your face, or basically, or your video that you were projecting was projected onto the screen, and everyone watched your presentation and listened to the audio. Okay, so if you're online and you're in class, you'll be projecting onto the screen your presentation. You'll be projecting your video onto the screen, and we'll be able to hear the audio in class. It actually worked really well last year. So. Yeah, you don't have to sign up. It's individual, so you just come with your topic and just go. That's okay. That's fine. You get to pick your own topic, pick what you want. There can be duplicates, triplicates of the presentation. Okay? Okay, we're talking about public health ethics today. Basically, the lecture is going to be sort of a little bit front-loaded with more lecture-type material, and we're going to do a couple activities. And then after that, we're going to talk about literature review strategies, sort of a quick and dirty on literature review strategies, and hopefully that'll help you with your assignments for the class. So what are ethics? What do they do for us? Why do we want them? Why do we care? Any ideas? Rules to follow by to do what? Okay, so there's some notion of rules to follow, some notion of adequate for all. Those are two good things. Those are in there. Yeah. Okay, so to make sure we protect the people that we're trying to help, and what would be sort of a, what are you thinking of? What's the background there? Exactly. So make sure sensitive information is protected. Make sure we don't do any harm to those people or don't intentionally do harm to those people. So it's kind of giving us a little bit of a sense of where to go and what to do in our work as public health practitioners. Okay, we're going to talk about that bit today, but we're also going to talk a little bit more broadly about ethics for public health, not as a practitioner, but as a concept or as a field. So we'll talk a little bit about that. This is from Thurston. Ethics is a systematical theoretical framework that can be used to understand the basis on which certain actions might be judged right or wrong, good or bad, acceptable or unacceptable, justified or unjustified. So exactly right. It gives us kind of a set of rules to follow to say this is either good or bad or justified or unjustified, or we maybe need to change it in order to meet some type of ethical standard. Okay? And this is exactly what we'll be doing today in our group assignment for the class, or our sort of group work assignment for the class. Okay? We'll be looking at an intervention and trying to say, is it ethical or not, using a set of principles guides. Okay? Lots of ethics kind of is like math. It's essentially, if this, then that, and that, blah, blah, blah. Basically, it's sort of a series of statements that if each one is logical, then the conclusion is logical, right? And it ends up being a little bit like math. Now, ethics is different from morals, so I just want to make this point. Morals are sort of things that are right or wrong and that are widely shared by society, but there's not necessarily a framework to say something is moral or something is not moral. There's no set of sort of guidelines to say, okay, this is moral, this is immoral, okay? It's just we sort of agree collectively that something is moral or immoral. Ethics is quite a bit more narrow in terms of what we use to define whether we think something's ethical or not. So we're basically going to talk about three concepts today of public health ethics, okay? Ethics of public health, ethics in public health, and ethics for public health, okay? So we'll sort of define each one. They all intersect a little bit, but they all have a specific focus. So ethics of public health is specifically focused on public health practitioners, people doing the work of public health. Ethics in public health is specifically focused on sort of this idea of what we do in public health intervention, justifying intervention, exactly the example we had. And ethics for public health gets us thinking about this broader sort of moral or ethical concept that public health tries to convey to people. Okay, so ethics of public health. So ethics of public health, basically, we're looking at the ethical dimensions of professionalism, moral trust, and the roles that public health practitioners take. There's a line there. Yeah, you better go that way. So the roles and the ethics that public health practitioners have. So what do we think some of those are? Can we come up with some examples of that? If you're out there in the field and you're practicing public health, what are the ethical, professional-based things that you need to do or you need to convey or you need to display when you're doing your work as a public health practitioner? Yeah. Confidentiality, yeah. Doing no harm, we had that example earlier. Yeah. Consent, so we need some kind of consent. Showing respect, sure. Being honest. Culturally sensitive, yeah. Not being biased in what ways? Okay. Could be that. That one has to intersect a little bit with our cultural sensitivity. We might need to be biased in some way towards one culture or another in order to be culturally sensitive. But yeah, there's some discussion there to be had for sure. Risk-benefit analysis. Okay, that's from online. Good. Okay, so ethics of public health, basically, we can think about other disciplines that might be somewhat related to us, right? Medicine and law have sort of professional codes of conduct. In the legal profession, you sign a professional code of conduct. In medicine, you have codes of ethics and you have a Hippocratic oath, which basically is a sort of an oath that medical students take. I can't remember if it's in first year or fourth year, but they take some time in their medical training to say, I will do no harm, so on and so on. There's a couple different things that they talk about. Okay, and these are all part of professional codes of ethics for law and for public health that are well established in Canada and lots of other countries. Do we have one of these for public health? No? No, we don't. Okay. There isn't something that's sort of agreed upon in Canada. I don't think there's anything in the US. I don't think there's anything anywhere else. But there's people working on this project. The Public Health Leadership Society is a European society that's sort of trying to develop a code of ethics for public health practitioners. That would be something like the the medical code of ethics or the legal code of ethics. Okay. So they have 12 categories here for their public health code of ethics. I want you to read them out. So read out the first one in your head. Just read it. And I want you to say whether you agree or disagree that this should be part of our ethical codes of conduct. Yep. Okay. Okay, so who are those people? Okay, so let's be constrained to people who are working in something like a public health promotion department or area within a health region. So they're specifically working in public health. This is sort of gets back to our debate about is education public health, right? Is housing public health, or all these things public health? Maybe and maybe not. Okay, but this is specifically for people who are practicing in a public health department. So should we address principally the fundamental causes of disease and requirements for health, aiming to prevent adverse health outcomes? Yes or no? Yes? Everyone says yes? Who says no? Okay, what would be the criticism of this, if there would be any? Think back to health promotion. What's the definition of health promotion? Okay, so disease might be a flag. Prevent adverse health outcomes might be a flag. What if we want to improve health? What if we don't just want to prevent adverse health? What if we want to improve somebody's health? Should that be part of our ethical obligation? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Somebody who's really in the health promotion realm would say, absolutely, that is garbage. We need to look beyond causes of disease. We need to look at what is required for health. We need to not only prevent adverse health outcomes, but we need to improve health, right? So that might be a flag for someone who's really in the health promotion field. Okay. Second one, public health should achieve community health in a way that respects the rights of individuals in the community. Yes? No? Maybe not? Criticism? What's the criticism? What's the criticism? Okay, so yeah, you might end up sacrificing an individual right, something like smoking, for some community benefit. And we're going to talk about how we can frame that, or how we can evaluate whether it's ethical for public health to intervene in that way, right? To take away a right to give a broader benefit to the population. Okay, so third one, public health policies, programs, and priorities should be developed and evaluated through processes that ensure an opportunity for input from community members. Yes? I'm a big yes on this one. No, maybe, criticism? Oh, yeah? Okay, so here they say that ensure an opportunity for input from community members, but what does that input look like? Yep, sorry. Okay, funding needs to be in place for this to work well, right, of course. But here we're talking about sort of broad ethical discussion about what we need, what we might have as a code of ethics for public health. So right, what does the input look like? Is it a collaborative process with the community? Is it sort of an iterative process that builds the program's policies, priorities with the community, or is it just like, come here, tell us something, and then we'll just do whatever we want anyway? So that's something to think about. Wordsmithing is important. 4, public health should advocate and work for the empowerment of disenfranchised community members, aiming to ensure that the basic resources and conditions necessary for health are accessible to all. Yes? No? My voting attendance is going down drastically. Okay, yeah, we should probably do this. This is sort of our vulnerable populations trying to address the needs of the most needy in the community. Public health should seek the information needed to implement effective policies and programs that protect and promote health. Evidence-based public health, basically, it's sort of the argument that they're making, right? Public health should seek the information needed to implement effective programs and policies. So if we wanted to make that a little bit better or make it a little bit more current, what might we say? Right. So public health will seek and act on an evidence basis or some kind of evidence-based, policy or recommendation to implement effective programs, so on and so on, because that information might be a bit vague. Public health institutions should provide communities with information they have that is needed for decisions on policies or programs and should obtain the community's consent for their implementation. Yeah, consent. We had that one. Public health institutions should act in a timely manner on the information they have with the resources and the mandate given to them by the public. Yeah, I like that one. What is the crux of that statement there? Resources is one. Timely is another one. What does that timely sort of get at? Sorry? Okay, so it gets at emergency importance, but what does it sort of, it contradicts a little bit number 5, or it at least puts a little nuance into number 5. In what way? Right, so it's trying to say basically we don't need to wait around for every shred of evidence or the best possible evidence we as researchers can know or can study or can evaluate. Sometimes we need to do something with a degree of uncertainty. Maybe we don't have 20 good studies on whatever the intervention is, but maybe we just need to do something anyway, right? And you'll see this a lot. This is a big back and forth between researchers and public health practitioners and different groups. Some people say, no, we need to wait for better evidence before we do something. Other people say, we need to do something now. Look, we can't just wait and sit around for you to do another study so that we can know a little bit more. So this is a back and forth that you'll see a lot. Public health programs and policies should incorporate a variety of approaches and anticipate and respect diverse values, beliefs, and cultures in the community. Cultural appropriateness. Yes. Okay, good. Public health programs and policies should be implemented in a manner that most enhances the physical and social environment. Oh, bench your face. Okay, so why do we stop with physical and social? What do you think? Again, the health promoters have had some influence on this public health ethics thing. Okay, good. So what are they trying to get at here in 9? They're partly trying to get at social determinants. They're partly trying to get at sort of social structural interventions that, in theory, have influence more of the population, might have longer lasting effects if we can change the social structural or social environmental situation rather than behavior change. So you can kind of see 9 as a critique of behavior change type interventions, right? But it's true that there's that conflict there. Yeah, Samara? Right, so that's exactly it. So this is sort of saying what we need is the environments first. That will lead to the behavior change, and just sort of individual behavior change interventions might not be enough. 3 more. Public health institutions should protect the confidentiality of information that can bring harm to an individual or community if made public. Exceptions must be justified on the basis of high likelihood of significant harm to the individual or others. Do we agree? Disagree? What examples do we have of this exact thing in practice right now? Saskatoon, lots of other places. What happens if you have HIV? Right. So it's a reportable disease. So you have to notify people, and physicians have to notify people. We have to know where you've been, what you've done, all these types of things, so we can prevent other people knowing. But we basically get rid of your confidentiality to say this person has HIV, right? This person has chlamydia. Public health institutions should ensure the professional competence of their employees. Yes, probably a good thing. Okay. So how are we doing this right now? What do you hear every single day of your MPH? Accreditation for the school, right? But what about you? What about you? No, what about you individually? What is this whole class based on? What is the whole MPH based on? Core competencies for public health, right? So basically, we're trying to say, okay, this is what you need to know in Canada to do public health, and we're trying to train you to do that, okay? I mean, obviously, you can be critical of the core competencies themselves and the training that you have within those competencies, and obviously there's on-the-job things that happen and so on and so on. But that's the basic idea. Take the core competencies, these things you're supposed to know, you get trained in them, and you also keep up to date, right? As new methods or new things happen. What are the, doctors, dentists, all kinds of different professional organizations have to do this? Yeah, they have continuing education, right? So if you're a doctor, you have continuing medical education. There's a way to get credit units. You have to get, I think, 16 credit units in a year to keep up your license, basically, to keep up your status. Otherwise, you lose your license. Public health institutions and their employees should engage in collaborations and affiliations in ways that build the public's trust and the institution's effectiveness. Yeah, we like this one? Yes, no? Yes, okay. So here we're talking, I think here what we're trying to get at is this idea of what if you work in housing? What if you work in education? What if you work in an area that intersects with public health but isn't necessarily public health? Well, maybe it's our role as public health practitioners to try and build the collaborations with those organizations that we think do public health but might not even know they do public health. And to say, okay, well, you're actually doing public health and here's why. So I don't know where this is going, this leadership for public health leadership society ethical practice guidelines. But it's something that, given where public health is going in Canada, I wouldn't doubt would happen sometime in the near future, that there would be sort of an ethical code of conduct, some type of continuing public health education credits, all of these things to keep up your public health training, okay? That's where things have been in a lot of different disciplines for a long time, and we are just kind of catching up to that. So I don't think that that's very far off, to be honest. So that's ethics of public health. That's you or us as public health practitioners. What are our obligations? What are we trying to do? And I would encourage you to sort of go back and revisit those 12 steps, think about them, think about how they might apply to your own work, right? Or whatever interventions, other things you might be working on at the moment. Second aspect is ethics in public health. So this is when we're talking about the ethics of public health interventions or the enterprise. So essentially, oftentimes it ends up being trade-off between collective goods and individual interests. So am I allowed to stop you from smoking on your street because there's some collective benefit, okay? There's also a social justice component to this because we're talking about equal allocations of benefits and burdens, and at the end of the day, what we want is to bring up those lower socioeconomic groups to have a similar level of health to the higher socioeconomic group. So we're talking about, again, equality, equity, and we'll talk about that when we talk about social determinants of health. So what does this look like in terms of actually designing an intervention? So this is from Upshur, which is posted in Blackboard. Basically, she proposed that there's 4 categories for justifying public health intervention, sort of 4 criteria that we have to meet in order to say, yes, we can actually, take away your individual right to smoke in a building, for example. There's a harm principle, there's a least restrictive or coercive means principle, reciprocity principle, and a transparency principle. Okay. You can probably guess what the harm principle is. The only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. His own good, either physical or moral, is not a sufficient warrant. Okay, so we could take away something for the good of community. But what does that second sentence say? Yep. Exactly. It says, if your smoking isn't influencing anyone else, you go ahead and smoke. I don't care. Right? I can't justify taking it away from you because it's not doing harm to anybody else. Okay? If you want to drink yourself silly, go right ahead. Right? Right. So even this gives us some pause for discussion, right? But generally what we're looking for is, are you harming other people? And what's the extent of that harm? Yeah, sorry. Well, so we do have that somewhat in place, right? We have all our laws essentially do that. They say you have to do this. These are sort of the parameters within which things are legal, right? But then in public health, it's a little bit different because most of the time we're talking about things that are legal, but that impact your health, that impact the healthcare system, and that impact spending. But what we're talking about here is trying to balance the harm to yourself versus the harm to the community, and whether we can start thinking about justifying taking that away. And even this is not that easy an answer. But if you can swing it on one side of the pendulum or another to say the rights of the community are going to outweigh your rights as an individual, then that's one piece of the puzzle to justify our public health intervention. Okay, it's not the only piece. That's one piece. So the second piece is least coercive means. Basically, what we're talking about is the full force of state authority and power should be reserved for exceptional circumstances. More coercive methods shouldn't be employed when less coercive methods have failed. So it's basically saying, if you establish one, that we're taking away some individual right, you can't just then go and say, hit the person with the hammer or lock them up and say, no, you're not allowed to smoke, and we're going to make sure you do that by locking you up. Right? That's our extreme example. But we need to start with the methods that are the least coercive possible. So typically that's going to be what? A fine? Okay, so if we're talking about the legal system, instead of locking them up, a less coercive means would be giving them some sort of fine. Yeah, Samara? Exactly. So some kind of health education might be our lowest level of coercion, right? So a taxation, right, would be something that is somewhat less coercive, and it depending on how it's implemented, it's probably going to affect everyone similarly or equally, right? Environmental change, so changes to social or built environments, are those coercive? Where would they sort of fall on some sort of coercive level? higher or lower, more coercive or less coercive than environmental change, than, individual behavior change? More? Who says more? Why? Okay, so because you're in that environment, the environment is basically structuring your behavior. So it might be more coercive. Who says less coercive? Why? Right, so there might be a difference in interpretation between whether they feel their rights, whether they feel they're being coerced or not. Typically with a built environment type of change or a social environmental change, you're not necessarily even going to know that the change was designed to, the environment was designed to change your behavior. So you might not feel like your rights are being infringed on. But again, it's probably some debate. Yeah, Samara. Okay, so some type of progressive enforcement, exactly, and that's exactly where we're going. The logic is exactly that with least coercive means. We're taking the least coercive, and if that doesn't work, then we'll take the slightly more coercive measure, then a slightly more coercive, then slightly more, then slightly more, then slightly more, right? Until we get to where we are now with smoking, where we're basically, public smoking bans, all of the taxation policies, all of the selling policies, all of that stuff. We've gone from trying to change people's behavior to just saying, no, forget this. We're just going to do as much as we can. So that's number two. So first we have the harm principle, the debate about individual rights versus harming others. Then we have the least coercive means. So where are we at in terms of intervention, and have those less coercive interventions been successful or not? And then we have a reciprocity principle. I'm going to use myself today as an example for that. And this is an obligation on public health department or the rest of society to assist the individual in the discharge of their ethical duties. So it's a little bit of a convoluted sentence, but essentially what it means is, what we're talking about is, if I take something away, so if through public health intervention I take away some of your individual rights, right? As a society, I have to kind of try to pay you back for that, because I've taken something away, and what we want is to say, well, I'm taking something away, but we're trying to make up for it in some other way. Right? So I'm sick today. I probably shouldn't be here. But if, let's say, for example, we had a public health intervention or a workplace intervention that said, if you're sick, you're not allowed to come to work. Like, you can't. If anyone hears that your voice is hoarse or you blow your nose at work, it's like, go home. Okay? We could envision that kind of policy, right? What we would need to do in exchange for that policy, to reciprocate having that policy, is we would need to give people something in exchange for going home. We need to pay them for their sick days, okay? Or we need to give them some other kind of compensation to say, well, it's okay that you go home, right? We're making you go home, so we're going to do other things. Maybe there's some sort of process whereby other people in your workplace team take over your work for that day. Because it's not only burden on you, it's burden on your team members. You leave, well, maybe everyone else has extra work to do. So how are they going to be compensated or compensate you for that? Okay, so on the flu, the sick example, another example I was thinking about today was, so let's say my child is sick and I can't go to work because my child is sick. Well, what is the sort of reciprocal policy on that? Do employers or does the system say, well, we're going to give parents with kids more sick days than people without kids? It could not be justified, right? The flu example or the going home sick example is pretty clear. What about the smoking example? What if we say, no, you can't? What about all our smoking interventions? How do we sort of pay people back for the fact that they're not smoking, or they can't smoke in places? You don't get lung cancer, so you get the benefit of health. Okay, so we could say that we're going to take the smoking taxation dollars and put that directly into other programs that may be more likely to help smokers, right? Something like that. Okay, good. So that's number 3. So first one, we're evaluating whether an intervention is ethical. First one, is there harm or not to the collective versus the individual? Second one, are we using least coercive means, and how have we sort of gone through that process of evaluating the effectiveness of our less coercive methods? Third one, are we giving something back to the people that we're taking something away from? And the last one is the transparency principle. This gets into all of our discussions sort of about confidentiality and about cultural appropriateness and about all of the things that happen when we talk about how did we actually design and implement this intervention. So all legitimate stakeholders involved should be in the decision-making process. So this means that we need to actually talk to people about the intervention that we're thinking about implementing. And the decision-making process should be free of political interference and coercion. Obviously, that's hard, but this is something that we're sort of trying to say, to evaluate maybe not on a yes-no scale, but on a, is it more or less free from political interference, and what might that interference be? Yep. Right. So I think what they're trying to do basically in the sentence is trying to say, okay, well, it's not all stakeholders. It's anyone who has a legitimate case to be made in terms of the impact of the intervention or the design or implementation of the intervention. So I think they're just trying to qualify a little bit who counts as a stakeholder. Obviously, by saying that, you're limiting it to only people who you qualify as legitimate, and you need some criteria to say that. But basically, I think they're just trying to narrow the scope of who counts as a stakeholder when they're talking about a public health intervention. So depending on the policy and depending on how transparent you want it to be, obviously those would all be public. You would know who the stakeholders were, how they were consulted, so on and so on. Okay, so this is our first group talk for today. So everyone has either a copy of the article from the New York Times or it on their computer or whatever device. So here's what you're going to do. As an individual, by yourself, online people, this counts for you as well, read the article and sort of try to go through those 4 criteria: harm, reciprocity, transparency, and least coercive, and try to say whether this New York soda ban is ethical or not. Give your value. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to say, is the intervention ethical? Try to give some justification of why based on those 4 criteria for evaluating whether it's ethical. And then, so the first question you're going to answer is the intervention ethical? Yes, no. The second is why, based on those 4 criteria. And then in groups of 2, discuss for about 10 minutes. You'll see in the article, try to pick out where the author is talking about those 4 principles. He actually really clearly kind of talks about those principles without necessarily using, this is the least coercion principle, this is the harm principle. They're in there quite clearly in the document. Okay? Ready? Go. have 5 or 10 minutes left. If you're done, go ahead and start chatting with your partner or find a buddy. Groups of 2, please. Groups of 2, please.
Yeah, how many are there? It's supposed to be a group of two, but if they do a big group, that's okay. So the main thing for them to focus on is the ban on sort of episode now. And then the second piece is that within those four sort of decision-making criteria, reciprocity, recursion, and transparency, do they kind of meet each of those criteria with the ban? How's it going? Is the ban up there or not? Unethical? Mm-hmm. Right. So I was with part two. With part two. Part two small one. Then first. Right. Okay. Good. Yeah, and what did you say in the paper about that? You said it says maybe we should have done exactly. Yeah. Good. Good. Keep going. Keep going. How's it going? Is the public safety ban ethical or not? Ethical? No, sorry. The public safety ban ethical or not?
Probably not. They come out of two cases pretty quickly, probably, like and reciprocity and all that, and kind of help, I guess, is giving them information.
Good to do?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it'd be a good idea, but there's some extent over there who need the need. So that's, I guess, it's okay. I'm going to check everything out.
Okay. Good. And what are the points of contention? Where is it hard to check out?
There's some more stuff.
There's some more?
They didn't even start with a part, so there's a state that no, you can't have it.
Yeah.
And then let's not keep it going. Not really getting anything. Not being allowed to buy it.
Okay. Good. Is Captain the answer?
I think it'd be a better idea.
Right. So that plays into something that's important, right? So they're talking the trying to try to justify the soda ban on the backs of like the kids that we're trying to target, but by doing a ban, we're obviously not only targeting kids, we're targeting everybody. So it's a little bit of the justification is a little bit different in terms of how you think about
It's not really a very effective ban, because if you
Yeah, like a progressive path corrected.
If they're allowed to get it, it's just a way to make something to incentivize the small and reduce the
Good. Keep going. Oh, question? I'll go this way. Yeah. I'm in Canada. Yes. Yes. I mean, obviously, the majority of public health interventions are done in the political realm, right? Like, public health is a political entity, so, like, obviously we're part of the process, but there's some interference and poison in the sense that the intervention itself isn't being modified by stakeholders or different political lobby groups or different Exactly, yeah. Right. So there's a little bit of I kind of agree. There's a little bit of like mismatch here because the ban would affect everyone, right? Like if there was a ban, everyone would be affected by the ban. You wouldn't be able to ban things beyond tax. But if the intervention, but some of the justification for the ban is that children are some sort of the focus. But that doesn't really make sense because actually the ban always affects everyone. If the ban is the ban, then it affects everyone. Whereas if the justification is based on children's health, that the intervention should be close to the justification. So the children's health, if the logic is that you want to help children, then I agree that the ban should be closer to helping kids, and maybe the ban should only be on kids. But that being said, I think that the justification, the kid justification, isn't really like speaking it, right? I don't think the mayor of New York really wanted to only ban the kids, right? They're trying to make like a little bit of a twisted argument to say it's for kids, but we're going to ban it for everyone. Nothing. Right, so that gets into like that coerciveness piece, right? It's like, okay, well, how far are we willing to go to stop the kid? If you put in, for example, we put in on the 16 ban, how far are we willing to go to stop the kid from banning? Do ID kids, do we give for fines if they fail to ID, so and so, exactly like we have for alcohol and smoke, tobacco, and other things that are not so dramatic, right? So if you do the ban, then how far are we willing to go for the kid, right? And there's the same thing goes for who's to stop parents, right? Realistically, who's to stop parents from going out and buying a kid booze and cigarettes and having them smoke at home, right? saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's how we progress up or down the level of curriculum to say, you know, what's the target population and then how much enforcement are we willing to put on it to make it happen. If it's a ban, and if it really this is a total ban, this is like you can't sell it, this is whatever. So is it, do you agree? Is it ethical with the soda ban? Who said yes? Yeah? Who said that too? Yeah? Okay. Kind of, yeah. It does matter because they may buy something else. Is that the argument you're saying? To say like, you put down, they may buy something else. If pop is banned, 30% pop is banned, those socioeconomic groups may buy some other type of good. Right. Right. Good question. But at one point you have to accept some uncertainty. So like an example of that would be like you can't go into a movie theater with you can't go into a public space with a big soda. And you can only go into a public space with like a small fun car. Maybe it is. Keep going. How's it going? Are you serious? Oh, I see. Okay. Is the ban acceptable or not? Ethical or not? Okay, yeah. Right. You said that to 50 ounces.
Okay, everybody, we're back. Hello. Okay, so you've just had this debate, and then there was silence, and then people started chatting about what they did on the weekend and so on and so on, so that's great. We're going to have a break right now. I want you to sort of, I talked to not all the groups, but many of the groups, and for the online students as well, okay? Again, think about, keep in your mind for when we come back, do you think the intervention is ethical or not? Yes or no? But then also, how does the ban either meet or not meet those criteria? And then in the article, obviously, he talks about what taxation mostly as a potential alternative. So how can we think about potential alternatives that might better meet the criteria given what we know about the evidence? Okay, so keep those couple things in your mind when we have a break, and let's come back at 3 o'clock. So 15-minute break. We'll come back and we'll have a chat about that.
The women from the IT department in the building, and they're going to try to get them in here that we can pass on and speak so that they'll be able to hear the comments. Yes or no? I mean, some of the students have sent me reflections on public health topics, So what's happening in the country, one is on Ebola, and it's appropriate to get people into the country. Another one is on the abortion care. Just seeing slow down and kind of know what is happening right now. So you do that. Or you can do something like ethics or critique or whatever. Totally, do it. Do it.
Hi, Daniel. Sorry about that. I didn't actually, was helping Ola get connected here. We had some more problems.
Hi, Tyson. No problem. That's Tyson. You sound like a voice from on high right now, so.
This is your conscience speaking. This is your conscience speaking.
Exactly. I also spoke to Sherry from downstairs about getting another mic in here, so she said she's going to try to do that for next time.
Okay, that's good. It occurs to me we forgot to check about the mic setup for the lecture capture stuff. So that's my bad.
No, I think it'll work because I think this mic should connect to lecture capture.
Okay, you're using the lapel mic today?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll check the recording after and just make sure, and if not, I guess we'll tune in next time. Yeah.
Exactly.
How much has Ola missed today so far?
About half, yeah. That's okay.
So I've showed him where the recordings are for Collaborate, so at least he can review those ones too. So.
Yeah, and I downloaded the Blackboard one that works. And then I'll post it somewhere else so that they can get it, just in case.
Okay, sounds good. I should let you get back to break.
Yeah, break is important.
Daniel, I've gone and made Tamara a moderator as well in this session, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect, thanks. Okay, let's get started. Online, can you hear me? Yes, they can hear you? Okay, good.
Yeah, we can hear you. Hola.
Great, Ola's here. Perfect. Okay, so the question of the day. Is the ban on soda, 32-ounce soda, ethical? Yes. You have to be on one side or the other. You can't waffle. Yes or no? Maybe 6, 8 yeses? No? Most everyone else, no. Okay, so let's go point by point. Harm principle. Do we meet our harm principle criteria with our ban? No? What are our arguments against our harm principle? What's the crux of the harm principle argument that our reporter is making here and that sort of is implied from the ban? Exactly. So sort of the crux of the harm principle argument is this idea that there's harm on others, right? There's harm, there's a collective harm because of your behavior. And the argument that's being made essentially is that because so many people are engaging in the behavior of drinking pop becomes available everywhere in the environment, and that availability everywhere in the environment leads to an increased likelihood that you yourself or your child is going to consume pop, and that leads to public health problems, obesity, chronic disease, so on and so on. There's a lot of steps there, right? But that's the crux of the argument is that because a whole bunch of individuals are drinking pop, it becomes more accessible in the environment, and that means that you're more likely to drink it. And that will lead to lots of different public health consequences. I'm just explaining the crux of the argument. Does it fit or not? I'm not saying yes or no. but that's the argument that's being made, right? So we need to sort of try to deconstruct the argument. What are they saying in terms of the harm principle? What are they saying in terms of the argument to say, yeah, the harm principle exists or doesn't exist? So the big question for you to, sorry, go ahead. No, go, say it. Right. Okay, so hang on. I have to translate because online we don't have a mic. We'll get a mic next week. So for the online people, I'm going to paraphrase. The paraphrase is that if you basically, as an individual, if we buy that sort of social structural argument that because many individuals are consuming, we have environmental change, and then even people who might not want to consume end up consuming more, we would have to make that same argument for lots of other types of behaviors, like burgers, like any type of unhealthy food. Okay, so arguably we would have to make that similar or same argument for lots of different types of food. Go. Okay, so the ban is 32 ounces. That's a liter, pretty much. So the ban isn't on all soda. It's on a liter of soda. So that's maybe an important distinction can be made. Okay, but for me, the bigger question is, go ahead. The bigger question is, do you buy the argument? Do you buy that social construction argument or not? Does the fact that lots of people in the environment are consuming soda make it more accessible and makes even someone who isn't necessarily going to consume it more likely to consume it? And if they do, then they're more likely to get some health problem. Okay, so it's not the size, it's not the availability that's the problem. It's the fact that you have these ever increasing sizes of pops, right? In the States, the Starbucks, I can't remember what it is, the Ultra Venti or something is like, I don't know, it's almost a liter, right? Yeah, online. Elaborate on that, please. Because a ban is, when we talk about coercion, a ban is pretty coercive, right? Yeah. Okay, it becomes a little bit, each step, there's some evidence base for that step, right? And then you have to sort of, there's potentially too many indirect links, okay? Yeah. Okay, so there may be a direct link if we talk about a special subpopulation of pregnant women, right? But then we need to think about, well, is the ban for everyone justified? And that's another thing that we'll talk about in a minute a little bit, is whether the kid sort of argument validates the justification of the ban for everyone. Okay? What I would say to the indirect links kind of argument is the counter argument to that is sort of to say, well, we need to do something. Clearly, when in the range of 50 to 60% of the population is obese, we might need to take the chance on a few indirect links and hope for something to happen, right? Because if we only go with super specifically known factors associated with obesity and how we can intervene, we just don't have a lot to go on in terms of intervention, right? So the balance, there's some balance there to be had between we need to do something and what evidence base do we have to justify that. Okay, so that's our harm principle. Just a second. So yeah, the second point that lots of the groups talked about was exactly that sort of subcategory, that special population kind of argument, right? Is the ban for everyone does the use of children's health justify a ban for everyone, right? Because remember, the ban is for everyone, but if in the article they specifically talk about children, they say we're doing this for children's health. So would there be a way to think about the intervention and link it more closely with the population that we say we're targeting for the ban, right? So we could ban it, for example, in kids under 16 or under 18, right? Which would be a little bit different, yeah. But then when they're 16, they can drink as much. Yep. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so the argument is that kids don't buy big pops. I would say I'm not necessarily buying that, right? And maybe that a ban on 1 liter pop for kids would be justified. Like, clearly, well, nobody really needs it, but the ban might be somewhat more justified for those big types of pops. Yeah, in the back. There's lots of school-based interventions where there's no more sugar-sweetened beverages, Coke, and that kind of thing in schools. Those are kind of all over the place. Yep. Well, it's only in school. You're not in school all the time. Yeah, Samara, on the online. Yep. Right. So exactly, and that's one of those challenges with these chronic diseases that we know have multifactorial associations causes. It's really hard to pick one intervention and say this is what's going to do it. Right. It's not an infectious disease with one sort of known cause. It's much more complicated. So our interventions either need to be more broad or just infringe somewhere, do something different. Okay. So harm, we're not convinced. We're not convinced one way or the other whether it's good or bad, right? Maybe depending on what arguments you make, yes or no, we might say May or may not be met, depending what you say. Okay, at least this board is way better than the other one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. But that's your thought on that, right? And somebody else might think no, that argument for the sort of individual consumption leading to social accessibility, leading to more people drinking is valid, right? You can say that one way or another. Okay. Least coercion. So does this pass our least coercion kind of discussion? Yes. Craig's like, no way. No. No. Okay. Most people say no. Okay, why? Right, so our least coercive measure would be health education, right, would be something else. We've probably done enough health education on the effects of unhealthy food. People probably know, generally speaking, that it's not good for them to drink a liter of pop. Okay, what are some other measures that we could have for less coercion? Yeah. So taxation on soft drinks. Two ways that we could do this at least, right? We could just have a taxation on every size, right? Or we could have a progressive tax if we want to sort of keep the spirit of the large size, reducing the large sizes, so make large sizes relatively more taxed compared to smaller sizes, right? That keeps us in that sort of, I can drink it if I want, and if I want to buy 4 16 ounces, I can do that. But if I buy a liter or 2 liters, it's going to be taxed more. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, so we could have some kind of like fear or health education campaign to show the amount of sugar, the potential health effects. You could have probably the same teeth ones pretty much. A bunch of other things on the labels. Exactly. We could have sort of public pop bans, similar to what we have for public smoking bans. So you can't have a 1 liter soda in a movie theater, or you can't have it in a public space, right? We could do something like that that might be a little bit less coercive because it's not a ban on purchasing, it's just a ban on having it in that place. But if you're at your house or whatever, you can have it. Okay, the other thing obviously that we sort of talked about was ban among kids. So just ban it in 16 or under, 18 or under, do something like that. Reciprocity. What does our ban look like in terms of reciprocity? Kind of sucks. Why? Okay, so yeah, you're not getting much back, right? It's pretty heavy-handed to say, look, this is it. You just can't buy it, and nothing's happening. The main counter argument is you get some health benefit, right? That's sort of our reciprocity argument. We say, well, you get some health back, but maybe the person says, I don't want the health. I want the 2 liter pop, right? They could argue that. Okay, and what about transparency? No. Some head shaking. Do we think it's transparent or not? Yep. Yeah. Yeah, there was a question. One of the groups had that same question. So there's a little bit of a distinction to be made between the fact that public health as an enterprise is obviously a political enterprise. So when we propose a ban like this, obviously that's political. We're like, public health does political things, versus whether the how the ban is implemented or what was implemented was influenced. So in the article they talk about like big lobbying against the ban from the soda industry, right? So depending on what would have happened, we might consider that to be coercion on sort of the scope or the scale of the proposed intervention that public health proposed. So it's kind of a difference between public health as an entity that's proposing interventions versus how those interventions might get influenced through the political process. That makes sense? Transparency. Do you think all relevant stakeholders were all legitimate stakeholders were consulted prior to the proposal of the ban? Probably not. Okay, I can't say yes or no, but yeah, bans tend to be pretty heavy-handed, right? The mayor just comes in and says, "Okay, we're doing this ban. This is what's happening," and the public's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Wait a minute. I don't like this. I don't like bans. I don't like to get banned." Okay. Yep. Definitely. Right. So the mayor just said, "Okay, here's what we're doing," but where did the idea come from for the ban? Why pick 32 ounces? Why not pick 16 ounces? Why the whole entire ban versus some of these other ideas that we've had with only taxing kids or banning it in kids or only taxing progressively or what have you, right? Obviously, like if you're going to have a discussion about some kind of public health intervention to reduce soda consumption, these things are going to come up, right? Sorry, there's the question back there. Yeah. Yeah. I don't really know the process that it went through. Right? Somebody sued, obviously, and it ended up failing. But I don't know exactly the process in terms of the legislation. Right? It's a city. New York is a kind of a weird city because it's almost as big as lots of countries, but right. It may have been less likely to go to court if it would have been transparent. Yeah, should you? Hang on. Okay, so yeah, I agree. So the comment was that the transparency is really hard, right? And obviously it's something that lots of organizations know that they're supposed to do and they don't necessarily do well. It's really, really hard to do. So, I mean, I don't know if we can ever say that we have transparency. I think what we have to do is like try to be as transparent as possible as much as we can so that we're at least, that's our goal, right? We're always trying to be as transparent as possible, and you never know what's going to happen, right? Okay, so yeah, it's possible that he went to the mayor went to the soda industry and said, okay, here's what we're doing, and then just said, no, I'm not going to listen to you, right? Which maybe defeats the purpose of consulting, but obviously someone has to make a decision at some point, and he's the mayor, so buck stops at him. Or was the mayor, I guess, not anymore. Okay, so the last question I have sort of to think about is, out of these sort of alternative, less coercive interventions that we could think about implementing, what's the evidence base for taxation versus bans? I mean, do we know anything about whether a ban will reduce soda consumption more than taxation or vice versa? Okay, but Well, you could do comparative study with smoking, but yeah, there is published research looking at the impact of taxation on soda consumption. A lot of it from the Netherlands, but we could sort of try to look at it and say, look, maybe we can justify our increased amount of coercion based on the evidence that we thought about taxation, but what we know is that it doesn't necessarily work very well, so we're not going to do that. We're going to go straight to the ban because the ban has been shown to be effective in other places, right? So we might sort of use evidence to justify a little bit more coercion. That makes sense? Okay, good. So that was our. I'll change the slide so I know what I'm talking about. So that was ethics in public health. We're thinking about what is appropriate in terms of a public health intervention and how we ethically justify public health interventions. This is something that you're probably going to have to think about for your final report, right? If you propose an intervention, does it meet these criteria? Is it ethical? Is there evidence for it? Is it coercive? How coercive? Is there evidence to show that you might want to change the way that you propose your intervention based on these ethical criteria, right? So that's something to think about. It doesn't necessarily, obviously in your report, I'm constraining you to 3,000 words, which is not very many words. So it might be something that you just have one-liner about and say, we believe this intervention is ethical based on the criteria, so on, all right? So, but something to think about. Okay, the last ethics for public health, or public health ethics, is ethics for public health. Who remembers what healthism is? Can't remember if that was last week or 2 weeks ago. I talked about healthism. Exactly. So the fact that public health as an enterprise, we always make the argument that health is really, really important. And sometimes we kind of get accused of healthism because we don't consider other things outside of health when we talk about intervention or when we talk about policy or when we talk about any of that. And this is sort of this ethics for public health is that exact notion, right? It's getting us to think about what's the overriding value of a healthy community, and how do we go about thinking about that value. So here, public health professionals strive to convince the public and its representative political bodies that healthy populations and reduced inequalities are the preferred social goals. So that's really important, preferred social goals. The health goal is more important than the economic goal. It's more important than the education goal. It's more important than the you name it kind of goal, okay? And we kind of do this all the time, and we maybe don't necessarily know that we're doing it, especially when you're within your public health group. How many people say, no, I don't care about health. You can smoke all you want. Doesn't bother me, right? That's not an argument that you hear very often among public health people. It's something that you'll hear a little bit more often in sort of general discussion. So that's just the ethics for public health is sort of to keep in mind that when we think about health or when we talk about public health, we need to consider where we are in the space and where we are in terms of what we're promoting, and that other people might not think that the goal of a healthy community or the goal of health, generally speaking, is as valuable as we think it is. Okay? And that's different from you as an individual practitioner being ethical, and that's different from an intervention itself being ethical. Those are distinct concepts. Okay, so basically we have our three concepps or sort of subcategories of public health ethics: ethics in, ethics for, and ethics of public health. And they kind of try to do four things. In terms of ethics of public health, this is our public health professionals. They try to give us meaning and ethical guidance in our practice, right? In our everyday work, they try to give us something of where we should be going. They sort of bring back the themes of the field of public health and dilemmas faced. So this is kind of our ethics for public health, right? This is talking about there's always these dilemmas and these different challenges that we have that keep coming back over and over again. And by coming back to our ethical guidelines, we can sort of get a sense of where we're going or what to do, right? Because if we're saying, okay, we just finished banning smoking, and now we're trying to ban soda, like what did we learn from smoking that we can apply to soda? What's different about soda? How can we sort of think about the ethics of those two types of interventions or other types of interventions? Okay, the third one, this is our ethics for public health. So the moral weight and value of a community's well-being. So how much value do we place in that? All the value? Is it like absolutely 100% is the health is the most important thing? Or where do you fall as individuals on that value of health, and where do other people fall, and where does the political system kind of fall, right? That's a big debate. Health isn't 100% everything. So where would you say you fall? If I say go ahead and smoke, I don't care. Does that sort of, you get a bit angry about that? Does it sort of bring up some emotion? Yeah? Okay, so who does that bring up some kind of little emotion for? Go ahead and smoke, I don't care. For a couple people? Yeah, a couple people. Okay, and that's exactly it, right? That's because you have sort of ingrained this notion of the value of health, and that's something that you think is important. And you're going to have to contend with that a little bit, probably. And then finally, the last role of our public health ethics is advocacy to achieve goal of safer and healthy populations. Obviously, when we're talking about smoking ban, I keep saying smoking ban. When we're talking about the soda ban or smoking bans or other things, those didn't just happen overnight, right? There's all kinds of advocacy and background work and research that goes into trying to justify those and trying to get some evidence for the reason for those. Typically, we don't just go in and say, okay, this is the plan, we're banning this thing, or this is what we're doing, some heavy-handed type of intervention. It's not really that common. Does that make sense? Yes? So ethics in, for, and of public health, and then sort of our roles of our ethics. So you can use this, I would say you're trying to use your sort of framework for individual practice. You're trying to use your 4 criteria framework for interventions, and then just keep in mind this broad goal of public health. We're going to skip that. Okay, so our second activity for today, getting bigger groups, okay? Probably a good idea if you have someone with a laptop in your group, okay? If you're on Blackboard, this is live, or you can just punch in this URL. So you're going to read a little bit about the Tuskegee syphilis study. Has anyone heard of this before? Tuskegee syphilis study? Most people. Okay, good. Okay, so basically what I want you to do with your group, okay, and online students, same thing, is discuss the ethics of the Tuskegee syphilis study in terms of, in, and for public health. So you can think about it this way. What were the responsibilities of the researchers and practitioners who were actually conducting the study, ethically speaking? That's our of public health. What are the ethical sort of justifications for the study itself? That's our in public health. And broadly speaking, what does the study sort of get us thinking about when we talk about the value of health for society as a whole? Ready? Go. Groups of 4 or 5.
Continue. Okay. Are you done? You guys done here? You're all together. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good. Cool. Sounds good. Let's go to school. Good. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Did they have informed consent for something? Yeah. 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 Good. Keep going. Keep going. How's it going? Well, yeah. But actually, we're talking about. Okay. Yeah. And there's a known to it. Okay. Yeah. It's about 30%. So about 30% of the patients who were like given the placebo or followed up had symptoms and went to the hospital and did that sort of thing. So that did that whole there were people who do end up doing like that. The challenge is that oftentimes they didn't have access to transportation, they didn't have hospitals close to them, they weren't able to do like the proper dosage. Even among the 30% that got any kind of serum, most of them didn't get the proper dosage. So I mean, it definitely is something that's interesting. So those arguments that you just talked about, would you say that those are like problems with the practitioner, problems with the study? So is it for public health, or is it our public health? Is it like the practitioner's ethical responsibility that's not being met, or is it the sort of study isn't ethical from the outset, or is it the sort of broader public health implications?
You guys can probably use your mics if you want. Those of you online who want to discuss.
right. So when you right, so like the initial scientific things that justification did study was that there would be greater differences in the presentation of lots of different illnesses, so this is being one between white and black. So they said we want to study what happens when black people get this disease. Even even the scientific justification is a little bit of an that's really, really hard to justify because essentially so there's going to be difference in presentation. Maybe you could say there might be difference in presentation by some, genetic variant that is very specific that maybe also associated with race. But you can't say it's race because race is not, exactly. Good. What's the second conclusion? Right. Okay, so when we try to break it down, are we able to break down the different the mesh within the mesh, clean up the mesh a bit? That's the question, yeah. Right. Right. And then arguably when a treatment for syphilis was developed and they withheld it, then there's no reciprocity because in theory when you have a known treatment, you can give it to them, right? Nothing. So, and then the bigger implications for the cover test. So what do you think? If you were a scientist in 1936 or whenever you started, some life you would be too racist. Why do you think they might hypothesize that? Okay, I'll tell you that. The argument the scientific, I brought it back, scientific argument that the research is trying to make is that because blacks are different from whites, that diseases are going to present differently. So if you have syphilis, it's going to look different in a white person and a black person because black people are different than white people. Right? So that was kind of the argument was to say, well, no, black people are so different that diseases are going to do different things to them. Right? And maybe it's kind of one of the arguments is to say that they'll be less susceptible to this, to symptoms of syphilis. This is obviously so now you know that in order to, if you want to make an argument like that, you're making an argument based on some sort of genetic or physiological variation versus some kind of racial variation. So you could say, for example, the Penguin is the sort of easiest example, right? The European runners run fast because they have less of very specific genetic mutations that make them run fast. But blacksmith race isn't one of those variations, right? It just happens to be that they all share the characteristics and they're all run fast, but it's not because they're black and they run fast, because they share all those genetic characteristics. And if you go to other places in Kenya, the black people don't have those genetic characteristics. They don't run fast, right? So that's like it's a kind of a simplistic example, but it's the genetic characteristics or the physiological characteristics that matter rather than the race being a characteristic. Right? So that's where we're at now. Well, the other thing to think about is that the repercussions of public health sort of a medicine as an enterprise doing something really unethical like this. So there's been studies that have been published now that look at sort of black willingness to participate in research, black willingness to give blood, like all of these things, and that study is sort of a key factor in black people in the U.S. not being willing to do all kinds of different things, right? Because there's been exactly questioning it's a participation in the success. Now that's the community is it. Right, no. Exactly. Yeah. Perfect. Take a couple more minutes. And then start everyone.
Wake up. Okay, folks, let's bring it back. Online, you can still hear me?
Yeah, online can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so lots of discussion. I think most of the groups kind of picked out the main points. Obviously, this is like ethically, it's a mess and it's horrible. And there's a lot of different, I mean, we can have a lot of different reactions, a lot of them negative. What we're trying to do is sort of clean up the mess or order the mess a little bit and try to say, okay, what part of the ethical sort of mayhem that was happening in the Tuskegee syphilis study sort of goes into this notion of public health practitioners or medical practitioners' behaviors and code of ethics? What goes into sort of study design bias or racism that might happen within study design or within some type of intervention? And then what broader implications did this study have for public health and medicine, generally speaking, right? So we're trying to break it down so that we can clarify the arguments that we're trying to make, right? Because obviously it's really easy to say, no, this is really bad and this should never happen again. But if you want to intervene or you want to try to understand it better, just try to break down sort of what went wrong where and how, so we can understand exactly like we try to do with our soda experiment. You know, soda leads to individuals consuming soda leads to this environmental change, so on and so on. We're trying to break down the argument. So when we talk about public health, we talk about the practitioners and the researchers' behaviors or their code of ethics. Kind of what went wrong there? Yeah, lots of things. So no consent. Did they have consent back then? Okay, so definitely they didn't give consent. Yeah. Okay, so misleading. They made it seem beneficial when was it beneficial? No. Okay, what else? Right. So it's sort of a life course study, right? They're saying, what's the sort of life course of syphilis from some infection date that might not be known to following through time, right? Their goal isn't necessarily to treat, but to understand. What's the, yep. They call, and how? Okay, so once a treatment was available, they withheld treatment. That's key, right? So they withheld treatment. Okay, and what happened? What do we do now? If you're in a randomized control trial and they find out that the study arm works really, really well, yeah, they give it to everyone most of the time, right? Or they do some kind of stepped design. Okay, is there anything else from the practitioner side of things that we think went wrong? No? Yeah. Right, so how would you sort of characterize that? So when you say bad blood, okay, so here's a little bit of a debate, right? It's to say, okay, they're trying to explain to the participants what they're trying to do, and they say, we're studying bad blood, and they're not saying we're studying syphilis, and this is this thing, and this is how it works, and blah, 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 blah. So I think that the argument that's trying to be culturally sensitive, or at least, you know, make it so that a layperson could understand might fly, right? That might be valid, but the sort of other argument, the other side of that argument is what? Basically, it's like maybe not overt racism, but it's racism in thinking that this group of people won't be able to understand what you're trying to explain, right? So you got to be real careful with that, right? Even today we have to be careful with that, right? You can't assume that because you're working with some cultural group they can't understand or they're not able to, you know, follow what you're talking about. So, sorry, what was the comment again? Okay, dishonesty or sort of oversimplification. Slash. Okay, good. What about in terms of the, oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay, so will we put that here or will we put that here? Maybe kind of both. Okay, let's put it in so it's sort of our study design. So change study design. Oops. How do I erase? Design without consent. Or without a secondary consent to say, oh, we've changed our design. Here's the new design. Do you still consent to the study? What else? This is one that's a little bit maybe harder to pick out. What's the scientific justification for the study? Before we even get into like all the bad things that happened, before they even started the study, what was their rationale for actually doing the study? Okay, no, but you're exactly right, but keep going on that. So before they started the study, what was the scientific brackets justification for the reason why we might need to follow syphilis over time? And what's the difference between black men and white men? Well, we didn't know, right? The scientific bracket, again, assumption was that black people or black men are sort of genetically in every way, shape, or form different from white men, and that there's the scientific reason why we should follow them, why we should follow the life course of a certain disease in that group versus another group. Okay? So, do we buy that? No? Maybe? It could be. How would we have a better idea? I mean, this is one of these, and we'll talk about it a little bit when we talk about social inequalities in health, but this is one of these big problems with categories like race and ethnicity, is that oftentimes the underlying assumption that we're making is some sort of genetic variation. But the expression of race, color, or whatever is not a good predictor of genetic variation. So if we want to make some justification on, okay, we want to study whether people with sickle cell anemia respond to syphilis differently, then that's a little bit better justified, right, than saying black people respond to syphilis, for example. So we need to be really careful today, even today, we need to be really careful with when we say race, what do we mean? Do we mean genetic variation? Do we mean social factors? Do we mean both of those things? And how do we operationalize that, right? There's a big difference between the US and Canada in terms of that. US studies, when they look at ethnicity, what do? What categories are in their regression? Black, white, Hispanic, sometimes Pacific Islander, depends how much data they have, okay? Sometimes sort of First Nation, but that's usually it. In Canada, we throw everything in there, right? And typically our surveys leave that question open-ended. We don't say, pick a box, which ethnicity are you or which race are you? We say, tell me, which ethnicity do you think you belong to, right? So that respondents can just sort of say, okay, here's all of these different categories. I can pick which one I want, right? And even like some of the surveys I've done in Saskatoon, when you leave that box open, people who I assume are white people, I don't know, will write like Canadian Polish, right? Or will write like German, American. Well, I'm assuming those people are white, but it's hard for me to know, right? Like that's what they say their ethnicity is, so that's what their ethnicity is, right? So I'm going to say, there's inherent racism in the design. So we're assuming that we need to study something, but that's probably the reason why we're justifying that is probably racist to begin with. Anything else in the design piece? Or the intervention study piece? Okay. So, no reciprocity. Okay, one of the other points that was made was I mean, obviously you're following this group and you're not treating them. Some of them are going to get symptoms, right? And some of them might go to like another hospital and say, hey, I'm sick. Something's wrong with me. So one of the things that we know is that about 30% of the sample actually went to hospital and was treated with some dosage of penicillin for syphilis because they were like, I'm sick, help me out. So that's something that I mean kind of plays in a little bit, because even at that point, even the scientific validity of what they were trying to do isn't that good, because you have all this contamination from people actually going and getting the treatment that's available. Okay, what about for public health or for medicines? Kind of a medical example. What are the big implications of this study? What happened in your timeline there that you looked at? Right, so that goes into this in bit, but like so the big broad implications for public health or for medicine. Like what were the broad implications of the study? In your timeline, it talked about some of them. What happened? We found out the cure, we found out the study was bogus, but lots of things happened in the US because of this. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so yes, we kill trust, right? And there's studies that show that this experiment is related to fewer black people participating in medical research, unwillingness to give blood, unwillingness to go to hospitals. Like, that was big time. Anything else? What else? Exactly. So it kind of said, wait a minute, maybe we need this guy, and maybe we need this guy. Maybe we need codes of ethics for research. Maybe we need codes of ethics for researchers and research and study designs, right? And that was one of the outcomes, right? All of these different ethical kind of committees were created in the US, partly as a result of this. Not a bad thing. Too bad we had to do this to get there. Anything else? Okay, I'll take that as a no. What time is it? 4 o'clock. I always run out of time. Okay, so the last thing we're supposed to do today is lit review strategies. I'm going to do the real quick and dirty version, and we're going to be done. So same time as last time. You have this here. Your lit review strategy. What is it? Do you have one? What do? Just go to Google and go, hello, or go to the library, like punch in some search terms? That's pretty much what I saw last class when I saw people searching up articles. Okay? So I'm going to try to give you, I'm not going to say it's the way or it's the best way. This is my way of trying to start a lit review on a topic that I might not know much about. Goal number 1, get to Wikipedia as quickly as you can. Okay? Who here has cited Wikipedia before? So I'm going to tell you right now that I accept citations from Wikipedia in your final report. Go visit the Harvard citation method for Wikipedia. They've developed their own method on how to cite Wikipedia. Okay, I think it's totally acceptable to do that. Okay, and what are you looking for? What are you doing on Wikipedia? Let's just like fly there right now. Give me a search term. Search term? Somebody? What? Tuskegee, you're going to find the whole lecture. Jeez. Tuskegee, Alabama. We don't want that. We want study. There you go. Infamous clinical study, blah, blah, blah. The timeline, the history, the pictures of the people involved. This is where I got the picture for the slide. Okay? So what's important about Wikipedia? Why do I go there first? Why do I say go there first? Don't go to Google. Don't go to Use Ask a Library. Exactly. It sort of synthesizes a lot down, and it gives you a good introduction, right? It also gives you lots of keywords. So let's say you don't know even what keywords you're supposed to start with. What are the key search terms that you need when you go to a database to look something up? Well, if you don't even know, you're just going to get lost in that database, right? Type in Tuskegee study to Google, and you're going to get millions of hits, and it's hard to tell what's going on there. The second thing that is important for me, the reason why I use Wikipedia is probably not for Tuskegee, but probably for some medical type of thing. In our references, we'll find that next crucial bit of information. And that next crucial bit of information is your review articles. Okay? So I'm going straight from Wikipedia to try to find my meta-analysis systematic review, my narrative review, my scoping review, to try to get that second level of detail. Thank you. So yeah, my review study is going to sort of give me what the literature looks like, and it's going to give me the crucial kind of debates in the literature. Wikipedia might not do that very well. Wikipedia is going to give me the sort of summary Coles notes, but it's not going to say this is where the research needs to go. These are the gaps in the literature. These are this, that, and the other thing, right? So when you're looking for review articles, you can go to Wikipedia might have some. Go to Cochrane if you haven't used that, Cochrane reviews, and then go to specific review journals. So public health reviews, epidemiologic reviews. These are journals that only publish reviews. So they commission the best 2 or 3 people in the field that year, and they say, hey, can you do a review on the ethics of public health? And they'll write a review on that, usually 10,000 words or something. I can guarantee you that for each one of your topics, there's a review study out there somewhere. It's crucial to find that. Once you found that study, that review study or those couple of review studies, then you can go and you'll know your keywords, you know your literature searches, and you can actually go to primary literature and sort of start looking at that. Okay? The other thing your review study is going to do is it's going to cite a ton of papers. It's going to cite like 100 papers probably or more. So what are the key papers from that review study that you can sort of go to and say, oh, this says this, citation number 53, that article I want, this article I want. Okay? So that's sort of one of the crucial bits with your review studies. Okay, and then your primary lit search pieces, your use Ask Library. I use Google Scholar tons. Okay, scholar.google.com. You can find lots of things there. If you go down the road of Google Scholar or something else, who knows anything about search operators? Okay, so the link is there. You can look at it. But basically, search operators are going to help you refine your search, change your search, and be very systematic about your search. So this is exactly what you need when you're looking for very specific sort of scientific information. You can totally get lost, right? So if you look down here, you can look at your search operators. You can look within a website, get links. You can look, or you can do all kinds of stuff. So check that out. And my last little bit of the class is reference software. Who uses Reference Manager right now? Okay, if you don't, I highly encourage you to start today. Okay, why? Because they save you a ton of time. They help you organize your content, all your citations, references, all that kind of thing. And in my world, in the world of publications, most of the time when I submit a paper to a journal, it gets rejected. And then the next journal I want to submit to has a completely different reference style. And the amount of time that it takes to sort of redo all the references and change everything is way too long. So you can just click a button and say, change from American Psychological Association to American Medical Association, boom, done, resubmit. Okay? And I just had a list of a whole bunch of them. I don't know what we have access to actually at U of S. What do you have? Do you have access to anything for free? RefWorks? Okay, so if it's RefWorks, use RefWorks. There's also 2 free ones here, Mendeley and Zotero. They're both pretty good. They're kind of in browser, so they work within Firefox and Chrome. So you're working basically directly from your browser, and you'll just say like export to Mendeley or Zotero, and it'll work. I use Papers. There's Sente, and obviously RefWorks and EndNote. So start using those. Use those for your group assignments. They are extremely helpful. The other thing, if someone hires you to do, lit review or whatever, you can you can do your whole lit review with your reference manager and then export your reference manager, and then they can import it and they can have all that data. You'll look like a genius when you do that. Okay, so that's something that might be helpful. Okay, so in terms of lit review strategies, before you go, Wikipedia, find your systematic review or your review study, and then go to the primary literature. Don't waste your time in the primary literature before you even know what you're trying to get done. Okay? Next week we have our epi review with Dr. Waldner, so that's going to be fun. You actually do have to calculate odds ratios and stuff by hand in the review, so come prepared with your thinking caps on. Okay? Thanks, everyone.
Can't hear what you're saying now. Hello? This online Olatunji Obidia, I can't. The audio.
Hi, Olatunji.
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Kind of. Can't hear Tamara at all.
Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, I cannot hear what Tamara is saying at all.
Oh, we're done class. Class is over.
Oh,